While retaining their draft pick and moving up to the third overall pick due to the lottery is a win in itself, what matters is what the Sixers do with the selection. And if we know anything about Daryl Morey, he will not leave any stone unturned. We have a new mock trade that has popped to the table involving Cam Johnson in a potential trade-up situation that I do want to dive into and see if it could make sense for this Sixers team. Now, I've been pretty clear across the board that my full opinion here is the Sixers absolutely have to walk away with a rookie here, a top-end selection in this draft pick, but that does not mean I'm completely closed-minded to the concept of moving down. If you can remain in these first few draft picks, which is a mock trade that would allow you that opportunity while picking up some additional assets that could help this team win now, you could get a potential win-win, and that is the conversation that I do want to get into today. Now, before I dive fully into it, I do want to remind you guys always to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. That at this point in time, 31.5% of you guys watching, that's all that has subscribed to us here at Sixers Digest just yet. Appreciate that, but let's get this Sixers Digest family growing. We got an exciting offseason ahead, and I think a much better Sixers season on the horizon. Now, let's get into the topic of today. And I do want to approach this from a couple angles. For starters, we're going to throw this mock trade on the table here, and then I want to dive into both the just personnel outlook for it, as well as the monetary outlook that there is an impact as well. Now, to dive into the mock trade, this coming from the Rights of Ricky Sanchez podcast. Shout out to those guys over there. And from Mike O'Connor, who writes, trading back to the number 8 pick. The Sixers get Cam Johnson and the number 8 overall pick in exchange for Kelly Oubre, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, the number 3 overall pick, and the number 35 overall pick. Now, the only quick thing that I'll interject, I would be pretty against giving up the number 35 overall pick. I know that it is a second-round pick here, but that is a pretty pristine spot to be sitting in here that you can kind of see who falls out of the first round and have an opportunity at that. And there are some unique kind of contractual situations that you can do with second-round picks. The first-round picks are always guaranteed contracts in the NBA. Not the case in the second round. That you can get guys on two-way contracts, non-guaranteed, a little bit more flexibility that it allows you. And looking back historically, there's always at least a role player or a handful of role players that come out of that window of the draft here. So that is a pick that I would not really be willing to give up, although, we can talk the details later. Now, to dive into what he writes out, constructing a deal with the Nets is a bit complicated. Cameron Johnson is a very good player and is likely worth more than just the ability to jump up 5 spots in the draft. And for a team that may potentially get the Sixers 2027 first-round pick, which is top 8 protected, they may have conflicting feelings on giving the Sixers a piece that helps them win now. Still, in a vacuum, I think this deal is pretty fair, and it helps both sides get something they want. The Nets get a top 3 pick in the draft to help anchor their franchise for years to come, as well as an early second rounder. The Sixers get a mid-lottery pick in addition to a very good player who fills a massive need, both in terms of position and skill set. Now, to make the pitch from the Nets' perspective here, they were one of the losers of this lottery. That while the Sixers did move up a couple of spots, teams like the Jazz, the Wizards, the Nets were not afforded that luxury. That they had their tanking season, had a very disappointing year overall across these boards, each of these teams that I mentioned, but aren't really going to get a chance at one of these true blue chip prospects. If the Nets are in love with Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe, Daryl Morey very well could open the door for this. And in fact, we've gotten that report in itself here. Shams Charania on the Pat McAfee show just earlier saying, quote, the Sixers are expected to receive a ton of trade calls about the third overall pick ahead of the 2025 NBA draft. Now, the messaging across the board from the Sixers has been that they intend to make a draft pick. But we know Daryl. We know how he likes to wheel and deal, and this is the type of move that I do think could fire him up a little bit. Now, to dive into a little bit of who Cam Johnson is as a player, of course, him just kind of rotting away in the Brooklyn Nets right now, but this is a player who's played a key role on contending teams dating back to his time with the Phoenix Suns. But looking at last year's stats, the 29-year-old averaged 18.8 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 3.4 assists, shot 47.5% from the field and 39.0% from 3 there. And those, while career highs in the scoring department now, are not extreme outliers. To take a look at his larger sample size, that you can kind of see across the board somewhat in that vicinity there. The shooting splits are most notably what I did want to point out here. For his career, he's a 39.2% three-point shooter, with his best season being shooting over 40% from the floor, 42.5% back in the 21-22 season with the Phoenix Suns. He came in third place in Sixth Man of the Year voting. He is a guy who does fit that true 3-and-D archetype of player there. The only problem with it is kind of the contract thing. That is why when looking at this mock trade once again, we are stacking so many salaries that he is, I would argue, a bit more expensive than his talent fully commands. That's probably unfair to him to fully put it out there like that. But if we're talking about adding Oubre, Drummond, and Gordon all to this mix here, which, by the way, 3 guys on player options. So who would be opting in with the intention of coming back? You're probably going to have this conversation. So it does get a little bit complicated with what it mentions. But to look at this from Cam Johnson's perspective, he has to be itching at the opportunity to be freed from Brooklyn here. And it is a guy that I think could help this Sixers team. If you think about a starting 5 along the lines of Joel Embiid, Paul George, Cam Johnson, and either whether it is Quentin Grimes or Jared McCain plus Tyrese Maxey there, that's a really good starting 6, not even including whoever you do end up scooping up with this 8th overall pick. Now, the other factor that I did want to acknowledge here is the monetary aspect. The Sixers are not in the typical spot that most teams picking 3rd overall. Typically, there is this illustrious cap space, all this flexibility that you can roll with here. Not the case for the Sixers. That they had their all-in offseason last year where they made these moves. They signed Paul George to a max contract, gave Tyrese Maxey his max extension, gave Joel Embiid an additional extension there, signed Caleb Martin to a notable contract, which was then flipped to bring in Quentin Grimes, who will be getting his own money this year. So they've committed a lot. To take a look at the full picture here, from a cap perspective, that you can kind of see. They're already over the salary cap in general here, but the 2 numbers that you do need to pay attention to are the first and second apron. That second apron number in particular, which you can see about $30 million in wiggle room currently, this based on coming from Spot Track, their estimations there. This is before the Grimes signing and before the draft pick is made, so still a lot of moving parts. And what the advantage would be to moving down a couple selections here is every specific draft pick has a set dollar amount set to what that player will be paid. This is not a negotiable contract. This is not a situation in which guys can leverage themselves. All these players, if they earn the chance, will get that opportunity to hit the market, but that is not how the draft works. And to take a look at each of these cap figures here, that you can see as I pull this up, the money for each pick here, that at the 3rd pick here in year 1, that is an $11.1 million contract that if the Sixers sit still and make that pick, that is what that player will be paid. And you can kind of see the breakdown overall equates to $50 million across the 4-year deal there. And of course, the final 2 being team options there. But if they were in this situation, as it suggests, to move down to the 8th pick, we're talking about $6.889 million. So do not quite cut it in half, but a decent chunk off it. That type of $5 million difference there could be the difference in whether or not it's keeping Gershon Yabusele or not. The Sixers got to weigh all these options on a sliding scale. I would hope there's more concrete conversations behind the scene with Yabusele's camp here. That is a guy that I would absolutely love to have back. And if you're talking about adding Cam Johnson to the mix or having these conversations where you can take a Con Knipple or a Derek Queen or a Trey Johnson if he falls this part, you can make the case that this would be a beneficial trade to this team. I really can't get a sense for how sold this franchise is on Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe. It feels like we get different reports every day. There's going to continue to be smoke screens sent in every direction. But a trade like this, I do think accomplishes 2 things. You still begin to lean into this youth movement where you make this 8th pick and pair that with Jared McCain, with Tyrese Maxey, with Quentin Grimes, Justin Edwards, who's going to be a key part of this team moving forward, and you still add a win now piece with Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson can help this team contend right now. And when looking around the Eastern Conference, the Sixers absolutely have to go for it next year. The Boston Celtics, Jason Tatum with an Achilles, out for at least a significant portion of the season. Giannis Antetokounmpo, you think he's walking back into Milwaukee? Because it does not seem that way. The Cleveland Cavaliers have shown their flaws in the postseason. The Knicks, are you scared of that team? The Pacers are good, but are you scared of that team? When you look around the Eastern Conference, things are wide open for the taking, and the Sixers have to take that opportunity there. So if this is the type of deal that allows you to check both those boxes, that is something that I could be talked into. But do want to hear from you guys if you were on the same page with that. I still have a soft spot in my heart for Ace Bailey. I would not be upset whatsoever if they just sit still at 3 and make that selection there. But these are starting to fire me up and motivate me and kind of talk me into the potential to move down a little bit in a way that I did not initially think I was open-minded to. So do want to hear what you guys think in the comments. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. And if you have not already, do want to remind you guys one more time to make sure you are subscribed to the channel. At this point in time, 68.5% of you guys watching these videos have not hit the subscribe button just yet. So make sure you're hitting that, dropping your comments below, and I'll be back. Talk with you next time. Peace.